Welcome back to my kitchen. It is Sunday, and Sundays for me mean it is time for some meal prep just to set us up for the week ahead. And this week with my prep, I'm planning to do more snack options, and I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of lunch options this week because I know with how I have meals planned out that we are going to have plenty of leftovers that we can eat off of. Something that I like to keep on hand for a snack option are homemade granola bars. I like to have these just in the freezer and we can pull them as we need. And these ones are great. They're a chewy granola bar. They don't require any baking and they are refined sugar free. So I am starting out with heating up just over low heat in a small pot a little bit of honey and some peanut butter. You honestly don't necessarily need to heat this, but my honey was a little bit crystallized, so I find it just helps it make it a little bit easier to mix together when I add in the dry ingredients. So in my pot, I've got that honey and peanut butter, and I'm adding in a little bit of vanilla extract and a little bit of salt. I'm keeping these pretty simple today. The base is rolled oats, and for mix-ins, I'm just doing some mini chocolate chips and some pumpkin seeds, but you could get creative here, use chia seeds, sunflower seeds. Feel free to substitute in whatever you like. These are pretty forgiving. So I'm transferring the liquid ingredients into a large bowl, and to that I am adding in my rolled oats, and I like to get that all mixed together before adding in the rest of the mix-ins. When I make this recipe and I do heat up the peanut butter and honey, I like to allow the mixture to cool a little bit before I stir in any chocolate if I'm using it, just to make sure that it doesn't completely melt. This recipe could not be any more simple. Sometimes I'll add in some collagen peptides just to increase the protein a little bit. I didn't end up doing that today. And once I have that all mixed together, it just gets transferred into an 8x8 baking dish. I do like to use some parchment paper to line it just to make it really easy to pull those out. And I transfer that in there and I like to press the mixture down with my fingers. I do also have a small rolling pin that I find really helps with this just to make sure that they're nice and compact and flat, but it's definitely not necessary. And these are going to go into the fridge to set for a couple hours. This week I was also due to restock on some homemade sourdough sandwich bread. I can't do any gluten. My husband can tolerate it though, so I like to have some sourdough on hand ready to go, and we don't go through it very quickly. So it is something that I will typically make a loaf of and then slice and freeze so that we have it on hand whenever he wants a sandwich, something like that. So today I'm making a loaf, and this recipe is super simple. I start out with some water and starter, and then to that I'll mix in a little bit of olive oil, some honey, and some sea salt, and I get that all mixed together before adding in the flour. I typically do this with a food scale by weight just because you get a little bit more of a consistent result. But I do have cup measurements. I know some people prefer that. I'll leave this recipe in the description box down below. But what I like about using a food scale is that it means a little bit less dishes. So I'm just adding in my flour, getting that all mixed up, and then I like to cover that and set it aside for about half an hour. And after that half an hour is up, I will start on my stretch and folds, and I do a total of 4 of them, spaced about 30 to 45 minutes apart before setting that aside and allowing it to rise. I think the most important part of meal prep for me is prepping some sort of breakfast option, because mornings tend to be busy and I don't necessarily want to create a mess in the kitchen, have to clean it up, and add that to my morning to-do list. So I'm keeping it really simple this week, and I'm prepping some egg cups, and I am doing these just with some green onion that I had in the fridge that I needed to get used up, and a little bit of cheddar cheese just to increase the protein and the fat a little bit more. Oftentimes I'll also add in cottage cheese and blend the mixture just to, again, increase the protein, but we have a ton of eggs and I need to get some used up, so this is a great way to do it. For this batch, I'm using a jumbo muffin pan, so this has 6 muffin cavities. They're a little bit larger, and with that I can fit in more eggs, so it ends up being about 2 eggs. You could probably fit in 3 per cup as well. And I'm just adding in some of that egg mixture that I seasoned with a little bit of salt and pepper, and I'm topping each with a little bit of cheddar cheese, some of that green onion, and then these are going to go into a 375-degree oven for about 15 minutes or so. At this point, my dough was ready for another set of stretch and folds, and you can really tell how the structure of the dough changes after a few of these. And I am going to cover this and just let this sit aside for probably about 3-ish hours until it's about doubled in size before I transfer it out, form it into a loaf, and let that rise again. After a couple hours in the fridge, the granola bars are fully set and ready to slice. Now you can individually wrap each bar in a little bit of parchment paper so they're portable, ready to go. I skipped over that today and just transferred these into a glass container. And I find that we don't go through these super quickly. They'll last at least a week in the fridge, but I like to store these in the freezer. So they'll be good for months that way. We can just pull them out as we need and they thaw pretty quickly. After a few hours of rising time, that sourdough is ready to form into a loaf. So I'm just transferring that out to a floured countertop. I like to pat it out a little bit and then fold in the sides and roll it up and transfer that into my loaf pan. And I will let that sit for usually a couple hours more until it has risen about an inch above the top of the loaf pan, and then it is ready to bake. I always want to have veggies prepped in some capacity in the fridge because if they're not, I am less likely to eat them. So today I am just getting some carrots ready. We've got some radishes from the garden. So I am just getting those washed up and sliced. Have those stored in a glass container in the fridge so we can pull from them as we need. And again, that just makes sure that we are actually getting in vegetables. I'm not prepping a whole lot today. It was time for me to do some grocery shopping, so this is the last little bit that I had in the fridge to use up, but even just having a little bit more prepped and ready to go is super helpful. To end the day, that sourdough loaf is going into a 375-degree oven for about 30 minutes. When it comes out, I like to just pull it out of the loaf pan and allow it to fully cool on a wire rack before slicing. Thank you so much for joining me in the kitchen today for a little bit of meal prep to set us up for the week ahead, and I will see you in the next video.